Jackie Johnson never imagined, as she printed up missing flyers at her son's high school, that they would never need to be hung up because in just a few moments, her son's body would be discovered. Not only was it every mother's worst nightmare come true, but it was the beginning of years of turmoil and heartache that would become one of the most controversial discussed cases of the 21st century. Aside from the weather being warmer than normal for the time of year, it was just another day. Students are seen on dozens of CCTV cameras going and coming from classrooms. Nothing is out of the ordinary, and on one of those cameras, a 5'10", 160-pound student is seen walking into one of two gyms at Lowndes High School. This gym, called the Old Gym, was slightly different than it was just before the break. 6-foot wide mats stood on their side in the corner, as they always did, except for one slight change. There were more of them, and it was this small change that would be all the difference for Kendrick Johnson. But it would be over a decade, dozens of investigations, lawsuits, and protests before the truth would be revealed. But the question is what we now know really the truth, or a massive cover-up? To really understand what happened, we need to start from the beginning. Kendrick Johnson was born on October 10th to his parents Jackie and Kenneth Johnson. He was an only child, played on the football team as a safety, and was well liked by his teachers and peers. He was a sophomore at Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia, and the world was his oyster and his entire future was ahead of him. Lowndes High School worked on a block system of classes, meaning that Kendrick would have been attending a different set of classes the day before than the day that he went missing. In fact, the last time he or his friends had been in the old gym had been before the winter break. Him and a friend shared a pair of tennis shoes for gym class, and instead of paying for a locker, they would hide the shoes under the rolled-up gym mats that were found in the corner of the gym. It was out of the way and easy access because they easily could just lift the gym mat and pull the shoes out from underneath. So it made no sense to Kendrick's family and loved ones why his body was found upside down in the gym mats. It made no sense to those who would soon learn about Kendrick's death why blood spatter on the outside of the mats was never investigated. Why, when it was clear by photos that he had been obviously beaten up, his death would be so quickly determined to be an accident. So how is it that many people so familiar with the case like myself are also adamant that it's absolutely an accident what happened to Kendrick? Well, let's rewind to when I said Kendrick walked into the gym like he had dozens of times before to retrieve his shoes. But this time, the slight change with more gym mats being added meant that he could no longer just slide his shoes out from underneath the mat. The mat he used was now closed in by several other mats. He climbed up on top of the gym mats. He didn't show up to his next class after that. He was not seen on any CCTV footage leaving the old gym. He didn't go to the game after school as he planned to, and he was never seen again by any of his peers or teammates or teachers. He simply vanished. When he didn't make the promised call to his mother Jackie after the game to get picked up, she became worried. His father Kenneth was a truck driver and was in Pennsylvania at the time. By 9:30, her worry grew to complete panic, and she called 911 to report her son missing just after midnight. Like what many dispatchers often do, they downplayed what may have happened to the high schooler, saying he may have gone to a friend's house, seen a girlfriend, or any other numerous things kids that age do. We've seen it time and time again in case after case after case. A disappearance isn't taken seriously despite the family's plea and declaration that this was unlike their child. This was first of many mistakes made. However, although the dispatchers tried to downplay the situation, they did file the missing person report and notify police officers, and by the very next morning, a police officer was at the school questioning students and looking for Kendrick. Jackie was a bus driver for the district and normally would take KJ with her, but today she drove alone. When she arrived at the school, the police officer was already there. There's reports that say the police officer was printing up missing persons reports at the school and reports saying that Jackie did this. I'm going to go with the fact that a police officer probably isn't going to be the one to print up missing persons report, and if they were, I don't think they'd be using school resources to do that. So I'm going to go with the idea that it was Jackie that was printing up the missing persons report. The missing person flyer for Kendrick. Um, it's also unclear whether she was in the counselor's office or the principal's office. I've seen both reported pretty often. I'm going to also assume that she was probably not in the principal's office and at the very least in the counselor's office. I just don't see her, especially being somebody who's employed by the district, using the principal's office to do something like this. Uh, and either way, I don't think either of these items are relevant to the case. It doesn't change anything regardless. And it was at this time that a class was in the old gym filling out a survey. Two sisters had finished up the survey and decided to climb up on the rolled up gym mats to lay down when one of them spotted shoes sticking out of one of the rolled up mats. At first, they thought it was somebody playing a joke. They called over some other students, and very quickly it was discovered by the students and teacher that this wasn't a joke. The teacher and students quickly worked to get the student and free him, but it was clear that once they got the mat down on its side that there was no saving the boy trapped in the mat. There was blood and vomit on the floor and the clear odor of death. The police were quickly called and news spread like wildfire. Because there was an officer already there, the scene was quickly secured. It was also at this time that a call was placed to the front office, and that's when Jackie Johnson overheard the call and someone saying a body had been found. She knew instantly it was her son. GBI and the Lowndes County Police arrived at the scene and immediately treated the scene like a homicide. Former police detective Derek Levasseur of the podcast Crime Weekly explains during the 4-part series covering this case that it's standard procedure to treat a scene as a crime scene if it isn't clear, like in this case, what happened. I'm going to link their series below in the description. It's a 4-part series, and they spend about an hour and a half on each episode, going into much more detail than I am. I tried to summarize this as much as possible, and it's still ending up as a 2-parter. However, they do spend a lot of time, and it's really kind of nice to hear from a former police detective his perspective on things, especially considering that so much of this revolves around the investigation and how the police handle things. So I'm going to link that below for anybody who's interested in doing even a further deep dive. I also think it was well covered. They really worked on looking at both sides of things and trying to understand all the perspectives. So a very well done series on this case. In fact, the only other one I've seen doing any justice to this case that stays objective throughout the whole thing. So I will link that below. So the school immediately went into lockdown and the police began their investigation. 6 hours into the investigation, Lowndes County Coroner Bill Watson was called to the scene. 10 days later, he writes in his report, quote, "I was not notified of his death until 15:45 hours. The investigative climate was very poor to worse when I arrived on the scene. The body had been noticeably moved. The scene had been compromised, and there was no cooperation from law enforcement at the scene. Furthermore, the integrity of the evidence bag was compromised on January 13th, 2013, by opening the sealed bag and exhibiting the dead body to his father. I do not approve of the manner this case was handled. Not only was the scene compromised, the body was moved. The integrity was breached by opening a sealed body bag. Information necessary for my lawful investigation was withheld." He never explained this further. He never explained in what way the scene was compromised. He never explained in what way the body was moved, because he said the body had been noticeably moved. For all I know, that means, he was upside down, and, the teacher and the students did did bring the mat down to try to free him. So I don't know if that's what they mean. The police do later on say that they didn't move the body. So I don't know exactly what he's saying. He doesn't explain it. He also says that the investigative climate was poor to worse, but he doesn't explain what he means by that. And then he also doesn't share if this was common to happen beforehand. He goes on to say, quote, "This was not fair to the decedent, his family, and the citizens of Valdosta and Lowndes County, Georgia," Watson later told the Daily Times. And, quote, "It's wrong as rain. You may not want me on your crime scene, but it's law. It's not something you can change your mind about." The CNN published an article later that year titled "Coroner Slams Handling of Kendrick Johnson Case." That's pretty much his statements on this. I don't know if I would call that slamming. I guess you could definitely call that slamming the case. One of the things I want to point out, though, is that he does state that the integrity of the evidence bag was compromised on January 13th by opening the sealed bag and exhibiting the dead body to his father. This is January 12th. January 11th that his body was discovered. And there's statements from his uncle, Kendrick's uncle, that says he wasn't allowed to view the body and was only allowed to view pictures. So I don't know. I couldn't find any more information on this, on why he stated that. But according to the coroner, the father, Kenneth, did see his son's body. So it's hard to see which one is true. I don't know if maybe the uncle was like, I want to see it too. I'm not sure, but that's also kind of a discrepancy. The sheriff's office later explains that while they're officially supposed to call the coroner immediately upon discovering a body, it is often not done because a coroner would not be able to examine the body until the scene was secured. The coroner would need to wait somewhere nearby until this happens, so officers will often forego this step and wait until it's safe to examine a body. In a town like Valdosta, where crimes aren't as prevalent as larger cities, you'll see departments skip formalities like this. While it doesn't make it right, it is not a unique situation to KJ's case. I doubt that the officers had any idea that this case would quickly be examined under a microscope and their mistakes ripped apart. Again, I don't agree with foregoing the formality for obvious reasons, and this becomes just one of many things that happen that help fuel the fire of the murder speculation. And I'm sure in hindsight, the police officers in the sheriff's office is probably thinking the same thing. I want to just put this out there. I'm not a huge advocate for the police departments. I am often frustrated with how they handle cases. I realize they're just human. I do realize that most of them are trying to do well. So I don't want this to come across as, I'm always trying to take their side, and that's absolutely not the case. I don't agree with them handling it the way they did, and I think in hindsight they probably don't either. But it does seem like this was not something that just was a one-off for Kendrick Johnson's case, that it was something that happened quite often with the case. So they seemed to be quite surprised with the way the coroner responded, and I also wonder if that was just his way of saving face, because it is a law, and he wanted to put it out there that, he might have seen what was happening. He might have seen the writing on the wall. So there was a lot of misinformation about the scene where KJ was found that also fueled the fire. I'm going to address some of the main ones. So first, let's talk about what was found at the scene. There's 2 pairs of shoes were found in the mat with Kendrick. One pair were shoes he had been wearing. They were off his feet, on top of his body, near his feet and legs. Another pair, the pair he was retrieving, were on the floor underneath his body, near his head. The only new blood found at the scene was inside the mat. No blood was found on the outside of the mat. No blood was found on the school book and yellow folder Kendrick was carrying. No blood was found on his lower extremities or on the shoes he was wearing. Some old blood was found on a column near the mats, but it was determined to not be from Kendrick. Bloody tissues were found in the trash can at the gym's girls' bathroom. Lowndes County tested it, and it was found to be female DNA. And a girl later reported to Lowndes County that she was hit in the face with a flag during practice, and the bloody tissues were hers. No blood was found in or on the second pair of shoes. The blood had dripped from Kendrick onto the floor, pooling around the shoes underneath him. In a photo taken of the shoes that has been widely circulated, and I'm going to put that in here so that you can take a look. People commented that if these were, they were commenting on why there was no blood on the shoes, that it looks like the shoes were placed there after the fact, meaning Kendrick died and then the shoes were placed there, which would make no sense, obviously, but it's the angle of the photo that was taken. So if you think about it, it's kind of graphic to think about it, but if you think about it, if blood was pooling around, if blood's dripping on top of the shoes, yeah, you're going to see blood on top of the shoes. But if the blood is coming from somewhere else and it starts to pool around the shoes, then you won't see any blood on the shoes. And in fact, when you lift up these shoes, there was no blood underneath, which shows that it was there before the blood pooled around it. So if you think about, to me, I think a good analogy would be, when your car is in the driveway and it rains, there's water all around your car, on your car, but then when you move your car, it's dry underneath it. So that's essentially what had happened with the shoes as well. There was another shoe found elsewhere in the gym with a dark, bloody-looking substance on it. Dozens of articles and posts online state that a mysterious shoe with blood on it was never taken into evidence, pointing toward a police cover-up. I have seen articles stating this as recently as 2024. However, what none of these articles state is that, yes, the shoe was left. It was not taken into evidence. But the reason being is that a blood presumptive test was conducted at the scene of the shoe, and the dark substance was confirmed to not even be blood. So the shoe was left. And what a presumptive blood test is you just take a swab of the substance on the shoe. You put it, I don't know if they put it on a slide or however they do it, but they take a chemical, and if it changes a certain color, then it's blood. If it doesn't change to that certain color, then it's not blood, and as an example. So it was confirmed it was not blood, so it was determined that you wouldn't need to take the shoe, which I think personally is fair. It was also reported quite a bit that the mats stood 7 feet tall on their sides instead of the actual 6 foot height. And then the biggest thing I see to this day is that, and this is over 10 years later, is missing footage of the CCTVs. This one's a bit harder to explain, and no one does it better than the Valdosta Times, which I will, of course, link below the article that I'm referencing. In fact, I think the Valdosta Times really did a great job in general covering the case. I would say they're probably the only one that did. And if you think about it, they would benefit the most from discovering an actual cover-up and a conspiracy, and they didn't. They actually end up confirming that there wasn't missing footage. So you can read the full description in the link below, of course. But essentially, to summarize, Lowndes High School had 59 cameras from 6 different servers. Each server has its own time system, and they don't communicate with each other or sync up. It would be like having a Ring doorbell system for your front door and a Google doorbell camera for your back door. If lightning strikes and the flash of light is seen on both cameras, it would be happening at literally the exact same second on both cameras. However, One camera can show the time as 5 p.m., and the other camera can show the time as 5:03 p.m. Two different cameras, two different systems, one single event showing two different times. That was an analogy that I think made sense to me. I'm not a tech person, so hopefully it makes sense to you guys. So imagine I just use an example with two different cameras and two different, essentially, servers. But imagine 59 cameras, 6 different servers, and in addition to that, different levels of technology in them based on when they were installed and replaced. The footage from those 59 cameras was exported by Scott Forth, a senior technology technician with Lowndes County Schools, and given to the detectives on an external hard drive the afternoon Kendrick's body was found. This same footage was made available to the Johnson family and media outlets through open records requests following a judge's ruling October 30th. Kendrick is first seen entering C Wing near the school's foreign language classrooms at 1:25 p.m. He is walking alone. He's carrying the yellow folder that investigators found near his body. His fall semester report card is inside. He smiles as he turns the corner near the B Wing stairs and continues to walk down the hallway in front of the guidance and administration offices. He does not stop to talk to anybody. No one is following him, and he does not appear to be following anyone. The last time-stamped video of Kendrick Johnson shows him opening the doors to the hallway that lead to the old gym at 1:27 p.m. The rest of Kendrick's walk was captured by two separate integral surveillance servers. The videos do not contain timestamps, but the footage can be matched to image stills from the case file that were printed from the surveillance system at the school the day of the incident. The timestamps on the still images are incorrect, and the discrepancy was first noticed the day Kendrick's body was found. Lowndes County Sheriff's Detective Jack Purdy advised Sheriff's Lieutenant Stride Jones, FYI, I think Stride Jones is such a cool name for a sheriff, that Kendrick was spotted on video entering the old gym at 1:09 p.m., but the timestamp was inaccurate, according to the unredacted Kendrick Johnson case file. The more reliable timestamp on the surveillance footage places Kendrick entering the old gym at 1:28 p.m. The integral server that captured Kendrick entering the gym is approximately 28 behind the surveillance footage. The Johnson family attorney stated that the timeline could not be constructed based on the information provided. The same information that was provided to law enforcement, the Johnson family, and the media, including the Valdosta Times, who did, in fact, construct a very detailed timeline down to the minute. So, like I said, I will link the article below from the Valdosta Times that covers this. This is their own findings. This is not from the police department or from investigators, but it was confirmed by the police department. Another issue with everything was the mishandling of Kendrick's body. And I know I keep going back and forth and calling him Kendrick and KJ. He liked to go by the name KJ, so I've been trying to call him KJ, but I'm also so used to reading his name as Kendrick that I end up calling him Kendrick. So when I say KJ and Kendrick, it is the same person. When Kendrick's autopsy was completed, his body was released to the funeral home. The GBI also handed over all of Kendrick's organs, which were placed in a plastic bag, and the bag placed in the body's cavity. This is apparently very common practice. That's what you do. It's the funeral home's job to either dispose of the organs appropriately or embalm the organs and replace them. If the organs are disposed of, most funeral homes will empty the cavities and fill them with, from what I'm reading, sawdust or cotton. And then in the case of Kendrick Johnson, his body was filled with newspaper. Apparently this was very common back in the day and isn't really done that much anymore. I don't know why it's switched up. I couldn't find the reason, but to me, I don't really see much of a difference between cotton and newspapers. So, but it is not a common practice anymore. From what I can tell, the newspaper is a cheaper route to go. So what could possibly be the case is that maybe the funeral home is on a tighter budget and they still use newspapers. It is not something that uh, is is against protocol. It's just not a common thing that's done anymore. And from what I've read, the funeral home they didn't charge for any of the funeral expenses for Kendrick, or it was like a very minimal charge. So that could also be the reason they use the newspapers instead, is that they were trying to cut costs because they were already fronting a lot of the costs themselves, as a gift to the Johnson family. So that is why they use the newspaper. So it's part of the embalming process. Jackie Johnson, Kendrick's mother, has repeatedly claimed that the funeral home destroyed Kendrick's organs to destroy evidence, and that they too are involved in the murder cover up. In addition to that, there are people who also say that Kendrick's organs were stolen and sold on the black market, and that's why his organs were gone. Uh, Not that I'm familiar with the black market and organ exchange, but from what I understand and logically, your organs would have to be fresh. I don't know how else to put that. They'd have to be taken out of your body and put on ice and kept really fresh. Otherwise, they would be completely useless. And remember, Kendrick was found the day after he went missing. He was found approximately 22 hours after he went missing. The coroner wasn't even there until 6 hours after that. And then who knows how long it took because the coroner is going to do his own investigation at the scene. I imagine that's pretty thorough. It's going to take some time. So by the time he even gets back to the lab, I mean, we're talking a good 30 hours before his organs were even removed. So I'm pretty confident saying that that's definitely not possible, that they were sold on the black market. So the missing organs. So this is something that we still don't have answers to. Somewhere along the line between the coroner and the autopsy and going to the funeral home, Kendrick's organs and his clothes went missing. So this is one and like I said, there's no, as far as I know, and I've done a lot of reading, we never found out what happened to it. The coroner's office is saying the body left with the organs and the clothes and the body bag, and the funeral home is saying that we got the body bag and there was no clothes and organs in there. So they're both pointing the fingers at each other. We don't know who's telling the truth. It could be, and they're both having representatives speaking on their behalf. So someone dropped the ball at some point, and unfortunately for the Johnson family, tragically, they didn't get their clothes back and his organs were missing. Personally, I think that maybe because you do a lot of the when you're embalming a body, from what I understand, they do toss the organs quite a bit. They just throw them away. So I think it's just a miscommunication myself, and that somebody did something and doesn't want to own up to it. But it is very unfortunate in this case, and it definitely helped fuel the narrative that he was murdered and that this was a cover-up. So that's probably the one thing that out of everything, I'm like, yeah, I kind of agree. That was really crappy, and who knows what happened. I don't think it was done in a nefarious way. I just think it was just really sloppy work somewhere along the line, and nobody wants to own up to it. And it's just really sad when you think about it. But what I do want to say is there's so much more to this case, and I really wanted to try to keep it into one part, but it's also a lot to digest, I think, in one part. So I'm breaking this into two parts. I wanted to do the first part with discussing the scene where he was found and what happened. I will go in more detail about the what they believe happened to him. Um, the cause of death was initially ruled as positional asphyxia, which is he went upside down in the mat. What they think he was trying to do was retrieve his shoes, and when he tried to get back up, realized that he couldn't get out. He couldn't bend his arms or legs, and passed that way. So I can't think of really, gosh, it's like the worst way. I'm claustrophobic, so just thinking about this makes me feel kind of panicky. And such a tragic thing to happen to anybody. And a lot of uh, there's a lot of stories with people who go into these caves and the same thing happens to them. There's just a lot of, your body just cannot handle being upside down for too long. So there were multiple autopsies done. There was multiple investigations done. There was multiple Emmys that looked at the autopsies. There was dozens of lawsuits and things that happened throughout the case that I'm going to talk about more in part two. Um, One of the things that I wanted to also talk about in part two is there's still things going on until 2024. This is being recorded in mid 2024, and there are still things happening, including a possible indictment being brought up against Jackie Johnson for her role in a false confession tape, which was brand new information to me since I started researching this for this video. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the Bell brothers. I'm going to talk about everything that kind of happened after this. Reverend Rose, Lee Touchton, the NAACP, which I struggle to say because I always want to say NAACP, SCLC, and everything that unfolded after that I will talk about in part two. But let me know what your thoughts are. Where did you stand before this? Did you believe it was an accident? Is this completely brand new case to you? Did you believe that it's murder? Do you still believe it's murder? And of course, if I got any information wrong, please let me know. I'm happy to correct it in descriptions in the future. I'm very open to being told that I'm wrong and giving the information and admitting to it. So if anything was incorrect, please let me know. But I would love to hear your thoughts on it. And looking forward to chatting with you about the craziness of this case for next week. So I have everything ready to go. Part two will be exactly 1 week from today.